That's the power of lean. It gets people to critically think. It gets them to, look at their work in a different way and a different perspective. Lean should never stand for less employees are needed. I mean, that should not be what it stands for. If you're doing that, people are going to stop improving because my job or somebody I work with would be at risk.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Jared Thatcher. Jared is a lean business consultant, host, and organizer of the Global Lean Summit, and author of Parenting the Lean Way. Jared has helped organizations across sectors apply lean thinking for real impact. He's passionate about taking those same principles from the factory floor to everyday life. We're getting into practical systems, culture change, and how to make continuous improvement stick at work, at home. Jared, welcome to the show. Where are you located at geographically?
Geographically, West Coast. So I'm in Gig Harbor, Washington, a little bit south of Seattle.
I know that you just recently finished your Global Lean Summit a week or two ago now, right? Okay, wonderful. Congratulations. I know that event production is not a simple thing, so that's it's probably fun to have that behind you as much as it was exciting.
It is. Luckily, I have an amazing wife who organizes everything and takes care of all of that. I just set the strategic vision, say, here's the speakers, here's what we're going to do. And then magically everything happens. Which
Wow, that is
amazing,
awesome. That's great. You work on that with your wife, huh? That's terrific. That's great. Well, we like to start our podcast conversation with a little segment we call the Spark. And the spark is usually, what I usually find is folks in this discipline have this like moment where, kind of the light switched on for them. I'm curious for you in your career, was there a time that you remember where this spark for continuous improvement got started for you?
That's a great question. I started working for my dad's steel fabricating business when probably was 13, 14. And so I would go in the summers and I would sweep up the floors. I would take care of things. I would run copies of blueprints, that sort of thing. Eventually, I started working in the shop itself, which for me was fun because I was driving forklifts and operating cranes and doing that sort of thing before I even had a learner's permit, which was at 14 was, incredible. And you can do that legally if your parents own the business. Just anyone's worried about OSHA. But what I think impressed me at the beginning working in construction and doing that is seeing the inefficiencies, seeing how much waste there was. We had somebody that would, cut the steel and there was always like leftover stuff and I knew just with, my basic math, from, what was that at that time? Like middle school heading into high school. It's like, if we planned better our cuts, we could, minimize the scrap. Right. And of course I would ask questions, like, is this the best way to do it? Isn't there something, better? And this is just the way we do it, kid, just shut up and, this is it. And so it always bothered me, seeing the waste, this is my dad's business and knowing how much everything cost and realizing that there had to be a better way. So I think early on, I realized that. And then later I ended up being the administrative plant manager of a manufacturing plant. Same thing. I figured there had to be a better way of doing it. And so I started, looking for those ways and starting to improve, starting to do things that were later I learned was lean. At the time, I didn't realize it, which is what I love about lean is that it's not rocket science. It's something that anybody can do, right? You just have to look for the opportunity, understand what's waste and do that. So without anyone explaining to me what those things were, it's been natural throughout my career of trying to improve, trying to get better. The epiphany, I think, happened when I finished my MBA and I started working at Daimler Trucks North America. And so they had lean, used it in what I was doing in what we called CCI, continuous cost improvement. We worked a lot with the factories and that was kind of the start of it. And then while I was there, Daimler Worldwide decided that they were going to bring lean into the office. So they had it in the manufacturing side, but now they were going to bring it into the indirect side, the office side. And they hired McKinsey Consulting to come in and bring that in. And I was chosen with a bunch of other people to be part of that and to be working alongside McKinsey as we brought it into different departments. And that's really where it's like, this is the missing piece. This is what I've been looking for. This is exactly what makes a difference. And yeah, ever since then, it's just been, company after company consulting. Yeah, it's been amazing.
I think that's one of the things that is so interesting about it is that at its core, it is like these common sense principles that just make sense, but the discipline of lean gives you like the way to learn about it. It's like you don't have to be a pilot to be affected by gravity and lift, but if you go to school to learn about those things, gravity and lift make a lot more sense. So that's great. Well, so where did the idea to start the summit come from?
During COVID, I felt really frustrated in that I had a lot of friends that had small businesses, so I'd see them on Facebook. They were struggling. Several of them weren't sure if they were going to make it through because of the lockdowns. And I knew if they understood the principles of lean, they could quickly, adjust their practices, overcome the customer, challenges and what the customer viewed as value. Because before, customer wouldn't even think about, opening a door to go into your establishment. During COVID, it's like, if I touch that doorknob, am I going to get COVID and die? Right. So, how do you make it so that the customer feels, safe, that you're meeting the customer needs? And so I knew that if they understood those, basic lean principles of adding value, it could make a huge difference. And so I just didn't have working full time, didn't have the ability to reach out to everybody. And this idea popped into my head. Why don't you do like a virtual event? I was like, that's a great idea, except for I don't know how to do that. I've never done it. I don't know how to, market it. I don't know how to create a website. I don't know how to do any of that. So that's a dumb idea. And for the next week and a half, that idea kept on popping up, and I would come up with 20 more reasons why I couldn't do it, and try to put it out, and just kept on coming. So at a certain point, it's like, okay, I can't get rid of this idea. Maybe I should try it. If you don't set a date, it's never going to happen. So I went ahead and said, okay, I'm going to do it in 6 weeks. And why I thought 6 weeks was a good number, I don't know, but I set it up for 6 weeks, and I figured, well, first challenge, if I can't get any speakers, then yeah, perfect. I can stop there. So I started reaching out to all of these people. I'd read their books, got a bunch of them back there. Every single person said yes. Not a single one said no. In fact, one person said, hey, normally I charge $10,000 to speak, but since you're not charging for this event, I'll just, don't worry about it. I'll come. So it was fantastic. Had all these great people. And it's like, oh, crap, now I got to figure out how to do it. Somehow in 6 weeks, I figured it out. We had just under 500 people attend. We had people from all over the world. And it was a fun event. And I was kind of thinking one and done. And then afterwards, I had some of these people that I'd looked up to, in the industry, and they started seeing the work that I was doing where I was working, and how we were doing virtual events. And I was posting about, how we were facilitating these virtual events and having great success. And they started asking me, what are you doing? How are you doing that? And I'm like, wait, you're asking me for advice? That's crazy. And so I realized I had something of value that I could offer. And we started talking, and then they were like, when are you doing the next event? That was amazing. I was like, cool. Okay, let's do the next one. And so the next one, we went from, I think, 21 speakers to like 68, 69 speakers. We had from 500 to 1,500. The following year, we had 3,600. So it kept on growing. Had people coming in and speaking from all over the world. We had people literally staying up all night on their time zone to be able to attend, just because they wanted to ask a question of Ricio Shingo or somebody else. And so it was a great opportunity. And then I had two companies, Albertsons, which is a grocery store chain, reach out and say, hey, we're tired of virtual, but we'd love to come if you did an in-person event. And then right after that, Costco as well. So it was like, why not? Let's try it. Kept it local, tried it, lost a little bit of money, told my wife, hey, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to lose money. I'm just going to stick with virtual. For me, the virtual is a way to give back. It's just a free event. It's great. And then my wife was like, no, that was an amazing event. You can't give up. You just need somebody to manage it. And I'm like, this is fun. This is part-time. I don't have the time and resources to devote to doing this. And she goes, well, you need a project manager. I go, I know. She's like, I can't afford one. She's like, well, you can afford me. And I'm like, okay. cool.
She
And so my
volunteered.
wife has been running it. She has been doing an amazing job. So I just, like I said, set the strategic vision, and then from there, she brings it into. So the last couple of years, we've been doing it just outside of Indianapolis. We've teamed up with Toyota and bringing people. Summit is not just about learning and hearing from people that have the experience, but it's also going and seeing at a benchmark company like Toyota how they're actually applying it, and they've been fantastic. They've given us full site access. We spend the entire day with them. They even trained us on some new tools that they're using, the weak point management, which is a fantastic tool. If you don't know about it, check it out. Yeah, it's been fantastic, and so yeah, it's just something where it's been growing. I think this year we had just over 50 people from 15 different countries attend, and it's been growing, and ton of executives from major corporations, showing up, bringing their teams. It's been fantastic.
Wow, that's exciting. What's your wife's name, Jared?
Anna.
Anna. Sounds like everybody owes Anna some appreciation for keeping things going. That's
Absolutely.
great to have someone like that that can help you keep the course when things seem like it might not be a good idea. That's great. So I love the idea of the events, because I think that particularly in small companies where you're like the only person involved in doing this lean thing, you have to have these external sources of inspiration. A lot of big companies, they'll more formally put together like sharing activities or, times where they come together and share best practices and things like that. What do you think it is that draws people to your conference in that way?
Yeah, I mean, one, it is smaller. So, I mean, there's great conferences, great lean conferences. ASQ does it, AME. I mean, there's a lot of great conferences out there. And I think the differentiation is we're less about, having consultants come in and talk about the things that they're doing in business, trying to, get business, and more about those that are actual practitioners, the people that are doing it, that are struggling, that are, being successful, and bringing them in. So we have a wide variety of industries. This year we added a healthcare track, and we got to tour a local hospital that actually designed the hospital using lean before they even started, building it. So it was fantastic. They did some cardboard models, kept on perfecting it until everybody was happy, and then based on those designs, then the architects went ahead and designed it, and they built it. So having come from a construction background, you can avoid change orders. You're going to save a ton of money. So yeah, it's amazing how I'm seeing lean, branching out of from manufacturing into other industries, right? So where I work, in government, we're doing some amazing things. I see it in healthcare, I see it in construction, I see it, in retail, and bringing all of these people together. I would say we're still probably at about 50-60% our manufacturing that come to our event, but we're getting a lot of other people, coming that are interested in seeing and especially making that translation from, okay, we hear about Toyota, and then we see it, but what does that mean for us? And so one of the things that we do is we take time to translate that. And especially at the end, we build a roadmap of this is all the stuff that you saw. Now, what are you going to do tomorrow or on Monday morning when you get back to the office? And so we actually work with them at having them identify, what their goals are, where there's opportunity for them to improve, come up with, some action item steps. And then when they leave, they've got that and they know exactly what they're going to be doing. And so we give that time to have that Hansei or that reflection time so that what they saw, what they learned, they can actually apply.
Very interesting. Are there some sessions in this recent conference that were super memorable? You might want to give us a brief synopsis of some of the things that were discussed.
They all were. No, I mean, we had some amazing people. Sam McPherson, Mr. Obeya, he's really good at Obeya, worked at Toyota, and then helps, companies set up their Obeya rooms, their daily management. He spoke about kind of, that vision and leadership that you get at Toyota, as well as his experience when he was in special forces and how those principles apply. We had Phil Wickler from GE Aviation. He's the chief technology officer. Chief transformation officer. He came and he spoke and talked about Flight Deck, which is their lean management model. And talked about how they're implementing it and the successes that they've been having at GE Aviation. Another great speaker was Andrew Koenig. He is the CEO of City Furniture, and if you don't know his story, you should definitely check him out. But he started off and learned about it in college. Came and told his dad and his uncle and said, "Hey, I think we need to apply this." And he was able to finally get that buy-in, and they started applying it. And like, wow, this keep on going, keep on working. And so now he's the CEO, and it's amazing. I was actually at his plant in January, and at his headquarters. Man, it's amazing to see the excitement that everybody has for lean, how they're using it. All the Obeya, rooms and boards and everything that they're doing. I mean, they practice it both in the office as well as in the manufacturing space. They're doing amazing things in furniture where you order a custom, furniture, and you'll have it either the same day or the next day delivered to your home. And they're even taking that one step further. And then if you spend a certain dollar value with them, they will move you from one place to another. And they have a moving service that comes in. So yeah, they're giving the customer what they want and really helping them. And it's fantastic to see how they're getting that single piece flow going in a furniture business.
Well, that's great. Sometimes on this podcast, we use these terms that are maybe not familiar to everyone. Obeya might be one of those. Could you just explain what Obeya is, or an Obeya room, for somebody that might not be familiar with that term?
In Japanese, if you were to actually write it out correctly, you would put a solid straight line above the O. So it's O. You hold it just a little bit longer. And so O is the Japanese word for, or think of it as prefix for large. And then Beya is actually Heya, which is room. And so, but when you put O in front of it, it becomes Obeya instead of Oheya. So it's Obeya, and Obeya is large room. And so it's really, think of it kind of like your strategy room, or a big room where you put up all your KPIs, your metrics, what you're working on. You track the issues that you're having and putting in those countermeasures in place. Who's working on it? When are they going to have it done by? It's really an opportunity for everybody to keep up with what's happening and, where they need to address their attention.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. You mentioned that you were involved with Daimler when you were taking this lean from being just manufacturing into like back office. I'm curious if, maybe there were some stories from your conference, or maybe you have some examples yourself of where this thing that is kind of traditionally thought of as a manufacturing discipline has been applied in other ways. Is there some that come to mind on maybe not necessarily manufacturing versions of how lean was applied?
Yeah. No, there's a lot of amazing things that we've been doing. Not just at Daimler, but in all of the organizations that I've been working since then, it's been non-manufacturing. And so it's fantastic to see departments and groups from finance to IT, go ahead and figure out how to do things a little bit better, right? A good example, in fact, the very first project that I did in the office was I was working with a team. This is kind of like aftermarket. So if somebody was wanting to do a redesign of their truck and basically, hey, I've got this older truck, the frame, the body, everything's good, but I want to put some new equipment in, right? New dashboard, something like that. They would reach out to this division, and this group would go ahead and design what and how that would work. And in cooperation with that, there was another team that would do the research on the different parts. And they had a huge backlog. And it was, I want to say it was like a month and a half, 2 months of, on the backlog. And when we did a voice of the customer, we found out that the most important thing to them was timeliness, that for them, they would like to have it within a week, and it was taking way too long. And one of the things that the team was so proud of is the thoroughness of what they provided the client, the customer. And so they said, oh, everybody loves the reports and loves what we do. And so we need 2 more people just to keep up with demand. And so I was like, okay, well, let's look at that first. And so we asked them, what do you think about the reports? And they're like, oh, it's amazing. They provide all this information, when the part first went into service, who the original, supplier was, what the original, get all this really cool information. And then the next question was, well, how important is that to you? And it was like, yeah, we don't care about that at all. What we want is these 5 things here. And they give us, these, 20, 30, things. And we just need these 5 things in order to do what we have to do. And so we went back to them and we said, hey, you're providing too much information. The customers think it's amazing. You're right, but they don't value it. And so what we're going to ask you to do is stop providing that. And so out of curiosity, how long does it take to put, one of these reports together? And they're like, oh, well, it takes anywhere from, 45 minutes at the fastest to about, 3.5 hours. I said, great. How long would it, take to do these 5 things that they actually value, that they actually want from you? And they're like, oh, that would take, 5 to 15 minutes. Fantastic. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to go ahead and start providing just those 5 things to them. If anybody comes back and says, hey, where's this other stuff? You'll mark it down and then you'll do the research and you'll provide it to them. But for now, you're just going to do these 5 things. Oh, but no, they love it. No, they don't.
Mhm.
They think it's cool, but they don't love it. What they love is having it on time, and you're taking, a month and a half, 2 months to deliver. Within a month and a half, they completely got rid of the backlog. They got to the point where somebody would go ahead and put in a request, and usually they would have it filled by the hour. Completely different. And they went from saying that they needed 2 extra people to keep up with the capacity and the time to do everything. And they brought it down to where they actually freed up 2 people to work on more important projects that they just never had time to do. And so to me, that's the power when you really understand what the customer is looking for, understanding what they value and what you can provide, and figuring out how to do that in a timely manner. Miracles can happen. And in this case, it really did. It completely revolutionized how they did the work. Everybody started enjoying the work because they really didn't like doing all of this research and doing it. And now it was something, hey, I can do this, get done with it, and I can move on to other things that are more important.
To get to that core information there, was there a certain tool from the Lean toolbox that was applied to get that answer?
Yeah. So for that particular one, we used in our voice of the customer, we used what I call a modified Kano model. So the Kano model or Kano model, it's actually named after Mr. Kano, Professor Kano. But that model itself was actually designed for marketing purposes. And so the fact that we use it and trying to do voice of the customer, I mean, there's value to it for sure, but the way that we use it is a little bit different. So we have the X and the Y axis. So on the X axis, it's like, what's the importance? And what we do is a 6-point scale. So, a 6 and 5 would be super important to the customer. 4 and a 3 would be, kind of important, and a 2 or a 1. On the other side is how satisfied are you with what you're getting? And so again, 6-point scale at the very top, man, if you're a 6 or 5, you're rocking it, right? And then if you're, 4 or 5, it's like, yeah, they're doing a fair job. Could be better. And then, of course, if you're doing a 1 or 2, then they're not satisfied with it. Now, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, because if they don't care about what you're doing, right? So it's not important to them at all, and you're not providing it, that's an okay place. On the other hand, what we noticed is they didn't care about what they were providing, but they were super impressed with it, right? They were super satisfied. It was, oh, this is amazing. But it wasn't meeting what their number 1 goal was on the far right-hand side, which was number 6 was, we need this in a timely manner, and we're feeling like it's a 0 or a 1, right? It's taking way too long. And so we're like, you're on opposite ends of the spectrum. They don't care about what you're doing. They're impressed with what's being delivered, but they need it now. Readjusted to what the customer was actually needing. And we were able to move that up to where, it moved up to a 6, because it was like, wow, we're expecting it within a week, and we're getting it usually within, 24 hours or less. So, yeah.
That's excellent. In terms of sometimes lean gets a bit of you might say, a bad reputation when people associate lean with just, purely cost cutting. You've given us a couple of examples of lean being used to improve delivery times or timeliness. Are there some, I guess you'd say, misconceptions or mistakes that people make with lean that you want to call out?
Yeah. So I'm all for cost savings. And I think when we are more efficient and effective in what we do, we're going to naturally get those cost savings, right? There was one time I was walking down the hall, and I think I have probably the best job ever, because it helps people really enjoy what they do, and it builds up morale, and people feel better about, the work they're doing. So I'm walking down the hall. I hadn't worked with this team in about a year. They see me walking down, they come running out. They're like, hey, you got to come see what we've done since you left. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, do you remember how it was taking us somewhere between, 3 to 4 days to get this work done, every week? And I hated it. This isn't why I joined the company. This isn't, what I enjoyed doing, but it was like, I had to do this work, and I was ready to quit. I'm like, yeah, I remember you weren't happy. And it's like, yeah. So we did what you said. We went ahead and made these improvements, and we reduced it down. He goes, we've continued to work on that. And guess how long it takes us now? I'm like, I don't know, like half a day, a day. It takes us 15 minutes a month. I was like, man, that's fantastic. They figured out how to automate it. They figured out how to make certain fields, required so that they weren't having to go back and double check. They figured out a bunch of things that were causing those frustrations, Kaizen opportunities, right? Those pain points, and they fixed it and they addressed it. So I think the biggest mistake that people make when it comes to lean is they look at it as, great, we got this down so that these people no longer have to do it. It's 15 minutes. It's automated. We can let them go. Worst thing you can ever do. Lean should never stand for less employees are needed. I mean, that should not be what it stands for. If you're doing that, people are going to stop improving because my job or somebody I work with would be at risk. You're actually going to have a negative, influence. Now, that said, sometimes it's unavoidable. The option is we have to let some people go because we didn't bring lean in early enough, and the company is going to go out of business. So in a case like that, if you're fully transparent and you let people know, I think it can be used. We did have a speaker that came in last year that was able to, talk about how that was a situation. They were brought in last minute. They were either going to go out of business or, they were going to have some layoffs. And he talked about how he was able to, out of a bad situation, even with laying some people off, he was able to get the buy-in from people. They understood why they were doing it, and they understood why the layoffs were happening, because if we don't, we're going to end up laying everybody off because the company will go out of business. Are there exceptions? Sure. Should that be the focus? Never, right? I think one of the biggest mistakes with one of the companies that I work with is they went from operations owning lean to finance owning lean. And finance started tying it to FTE. Big mistake, because it freaked everybody out. Now, what they really meant was, hey, what we want to do is we want to free up people. We want to take them and put them into, we want to hire within. So we can then free somebody up to move into a different role. Ideally, we're promoting people up, and instead of, hiring from without, and we can keep a lean force, and, we're tracking it with the FTE counts that we're saving, but not by laying people off. Unfortunately, when finance started saying, hey, we're counting FTEs, what they heard is we're letting people go. And it was not well received, and people just did not perform well.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight that you had there about shifting where the lean program sat in the organization, because I think that there's a lot of well-intentioned lean programs that do just make these kind of small mistakes really in the big picture that can turn it from a super positive, engaging thing to something less so. Are there some examples where you've seen companies successfully go from freeing up capacity to using that capacity to accomplish great things? Is there an example or story that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, you can look at Toyota. Toyota is very good at doing that. So if they can free up capacity in one area, they're moving them to someplace else. The big thing with respect for people is it's just that your respect for people. It doesn't mean, and sometimes I get frustrated with this because people go, you're not showing me respect because you're not doing what I want you to do, or you're not treating me the way that I want you to treat me. It's like, no, that's not what it's about. It's about, are we treating each other? Are we working together to achieve the goals and move the organization? We're following that Hoshinkanri, or a Japanese word for, basically kind of our strategic plan and our strategic vision. Are we moving the company in that direction? And are we working together to do that? And so when you free up capacity, are you giving somebody an opportunity to grow and to become better? When I do trainings, I often ask people, tell me your biggest moment of what means the most to you. What was your biggest success? And invariably, that success is where they had to challenge themselves, where they had to do something that they didn't think was possible. They learned something new where no one else could figure it out. It's when you challenge yourself. And so for me, respect for people is giving people that opportunity to grow, to challenge themselves. I'll often tell executives when we're putting together a plan on what we're going to do for a Kaizen event or something like that, and they say, oh, I want this person to lead it, or I want this person to be in charge. I'm like, fantastic. Let me ask you a question. This person's capable. They're able to do it. Oh yeah. I give all of my, top tasks to this person. I'm like, great. I don't want them. And like, what? It's like, no, I want somebody that, is good, or it's going to be a little bit of a stretch or a challenge with it. I'll work them. I'll make sure that they're successful, but I want somebody that, has that opportunity to learn and to grow, because then they're going to be, completely bought in, and they're going to be excited about it. And if you continue to go ahead and give the one person that is always going to deliver, they're going to be like, what the hell am I doing wrong? Because you're always, giving me tasks. Why aren't you, giving it to other people? You're overloading me. And then they end up walking and they leave because they don't understand that, you know, I can trust you to get it done, but that's not really showing respect to that individual because you're overloading them. So we need to make sure that we're treating people with that, that opportunity to grow, to excel. I was doing some consulting work for a major retail company in Oregon, and they had an issue where they weren't sure how to go ahead and train up the next force. They didn't have a budget for putting them through classes and that sort of stuff. And I'm like, well, it's a simple fix. You bring in your high potential, employees that you think are maybe ready for that next level, and you bring them into your executive meetings. Oh, but that's for executives. No, you want them to be executives, right? Yeah. They need to start learning. You're going to bring them in, and what they're going to do is they're going to take notes. They're going to take the minutes, and they're going to be responsible for sending those minutes out. They're going to be responsible for, giving the agenda and putting the agenda together for the next one. But what happens is they get to hear the type of decisions that you're making. They get to, learn what you're doing and why you're doing it and the decisions you're making. And so they're getting free training and they don't even realize.
I think that's interesting. I think one thing that is so interesting about that is, like you just talked about that example of the opportunity where one person, it might feel like a burden to lead this thing because they already have a bunch of other things. But for somebody else, it's that opportunity that they've been craving to learn something new, to step up. And I think that that's one thing that's interesting about this discipline, where it's not necessarily the task or the thing that needs to be done, but there's a responsibility of leadership to help grow the culture, to put the right opportunities into the hands of the right people to create that growth. Because the same task might not be have the same burden for different people. So that's a very interesting insight. I like how you shared that.
This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com.
How do you think the AI is getting so much airtime everywhere, and it's got people scared for their jobs? For people that are in continuous improvement as a discipline or interested in making it more of like, kind of their tool set, how might they think about AI? What sort of a perspective should they have on AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, where people are happy and successful is where they've challenged themselves. I think everybody should be learning how to, build models, how to, put together, GPTs, do different things to improve their efficiency and what they're doing. Now, keeping in mind, it's only as smart, garbage in, garbage out, right? You have to be aware of what you're getting. For me, I often use it, to like, there was a time I had to write an email, HR related to somebody, it's an uncomfortable email talking about performance. I wanted to soften it. I know I can be a little bit blunt sometimes. So I went ahead and said, here's the situation. Here's what the points I want to cover. Give me, a way that, shows that, that softened tone, that empathy. And it wrote this thing. I was like, that's almost perfect, and I changed it a little bit. So it was using the verbs I would use and I did a little bit of editing to it. But I would have struggled probably for an hour beating myself up, rereading it and just, wasting a lot of time to create this uncomfortable email that I was going to send out. I was able to, do the whole thing in probably about 15, 20 minutes and probably a lot longer than what I should have spent on it. But it was hit the message. The person responded well to it and didn't feel it as a personal attack and saw what I really intended it to be, which is, I want to be there. I want to help support you to let's get through what's going on right now. It'll give you information. And then you're like, yeah, I'm not buying that. So don't just copy and paste and put it in there, read it, use some critical thinking. But I think it definitely can help us to automate some tasks and to be more efficient. Unfortunately, I see a lot of finance people looking at it. Hey, this is a great opportunity. I can completely get rid of this department. We can just do everything with ChatGPT. No, you can't. And you're going to find that out, and then you're going to have to go hire people back, and it's going to be a big mess. But with any technology, it's trying to figure out the right opportunity for it. If you as a lean professional aren't looking at, how can we incorporate this into what we're doing, right? Whether it's machine learning, whether it's using, kind of ChatGPT type of, tasks and research and things like that, you're missing a huge opportunity to be more effective and efficient. And to show, hey, I can actually improve my performance. I can do, twice as much in half the time.
That's great. That's a great comment. So the next question here is, imagine yourself working inside of a business and maybe you have a CFO or somebody who's not as familiar with this lean discipline, and you're trying to give them some advice as to why they should maybe spend a little bit of time looking into this as a thing to study or to get more familiar with. What sort of advice would you give to somebody who's interested in advancing their business career about looking into this lean thing? Let's just say they're a little bit on the periphery right now.
Yeah, I think for anyone, whether you're the owner of a business, head of a department, or even in finance, lean has this opportunity to really help people look differently at something, right? I give the example of a glass, is it half full, is it half empty? And yet somebody with a lean perspective is going to look at that and say, well, you know, maybe you're using the wrong size cup, right? Or they're going to start saying, hey, why is it only half full? They're going to, maybe start problem solving and say, well, maybe, the filter is clogged and I could only fill it up halfway. And then I decided to stop. So we just need to, fix the filter. Or they're going to start asking, which they should have done to begin with. They're going to start asking questions. What do you need the water for? How often do you need it? When do you need it? What temperature do you need it? Where do you need it? And they're going to, start thinking about, what can I do to help you get what you need when you need it and where you need it. So that's the power of lean. It gets people to critically think. It gets them to, look at their work in a different way and a different perspective. And when you empower your workforce to constantly be looking for those opportunities to improve and to make little, quote Paul Akers, these 2-second improvements, to my process every day, you're going to have some phenomenal growth. And so, if a company is struggling, if a company is needing to do something and to be more profitable, if you implement lean into your organization, I mean, easily you can gain 20%, get rid of the overhead by 20% without even a problem.
Well, and kind of on that same theme, if you were giving advice to somebody maybe earlier in their career, and maybe they've spent a little bit of time in operations, or maybe a little time in marketing, or maybe a little time in finance, maybe they haven't committed completely to a track, what sort of advice might you give them, or how should somebody go about learning this lean discipline?
Practice where you're at. Practice with, what you're doing. Think about and we don't often do this. I mean, honestly, I didn't think about the processes that I went through or that I had processes even until I was really introduced to lean. So think about what are all the things that you do. Do 80-20, Pareto principle here. What are the 20% of things that I spent 80% of my time doing that, have 80% of the impact? And then start addressing, the number one thing and then the number two thing. And then look at that and say, okay, what do I not like about this process? And go to the point of occurrence. You don't have to, do a big Kaizen event. You don't have to solve the entire process all at once. It's great if you have the time and the resources to do that. By all means, when you're first starting out, lots of opportunities and Kaizen events are fantastic for that. Start with the biggest problem within that process step and figure out how, what's the root cause, what's causing this, what can we do, run some experiments, see what works, see what doesn't, and you learn from that, right? Edison didn't give up because, he couldn't get the filament right the first, 500, 800, 900 times. It was over 1,000 times before he finally figured out which filaments gave the longest lasting, thing to the light bulb. In fact, some of the ones that he designed are still, 100 and some odd years later, still producing light. I think some of the companies went backwards a little bit because, hey, we want to have a reoccurring revenue stream. We can't just create something that never burns out. But that's the power of lean. You can actually, create something. You can innovate. You can do some amazing things. And in terms of, something we talked about at the very beginning, cost savings, continuous cost improvement. Oh my heavens, there are so many different things that we can do to save money. It doesn't matter which department or which, where you're at within the organization. There's some incredible opportunities. I mean, I was part of a PMO group where we, over the course of 3 years, saved just over $1.1 billion. And my contribution over the 4.5 years of working for that organization was about $50 million. A little over half of those ideas were ideas that I came up with. So yeah, there's, and if you figure out the cost savings for the tier one suppliers that we worked with, it's probably, in the hundreds of millions of dollars with what they were able to save.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like those are some nice numbers to gather some focus on for your lean program. That's excellent. This next section here, Jared, is what I like to call the rapid fire. So these are just, that doesn't have to be one word, but short sentence, kind of a phrase type question and answer here. So the most important job of a leader is to blank.
The most important part is to lead. But
To
no,
lead.
I mean, having that strategic vision, and then where are we trying to get to? And then more importantly, helping your people to get there. So if you can do that and help them be successful, that's showing respect for people. That's giving them the opportunity to grow and to progress. And honestly, I've worked with people that will take the successes that you had and put it off as their own to continue to move up in the organization. And then I've had other people where it's just the opposite. They will highlight their team members, and it's like, hey, I just happen to be in this role, and I've got a great team, and here's the things that they're doing. I think it'd be interesting to see if HR ever did things that I think HR should be doing. If you have high turnover in a group, understand, is it because you've got a really bad boss that nobody can stand to work for and you've got high turnover? Or is it because you have a really good boss that is constantly getting his people promoted and moving into new roles? Just because you have high turnover it's not necessarily a negative thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting example of where a particular metric can mean multiple things, right? That's a very good example. In terms of like the lean toolbox and all the different tools and skills that you can learn, do you have a favorite like go-to problem solving tool that you like to turn to?
Gemba, right? Um, the biggest improvement opportunities and things that I've seen, the biggest opportunities cost savings wise have been because I've gone and I've looked and didn't have preconceived notion. Well, maybe I had a few preconceived notions, but I tried to be open minded and look and see. A good example, I was working for the finance group said, hey, we've got this team. They're responsible for the chargebacks. So anytime, a credit card gets stolen and they say, hey, we didn't authorize these charges, they get charged back. Or I didn't approve for that bag to be, charged, and they try to get the money back, right? And so every day they're getting, hundreds, sometimes thousands of these chargebacks. It was this team's job to log all those in and then to go do the research and try to figure out, okay, did they really pay for an extra bag? Yes, they did. Okay, prove that. And then we would, try to bring it back to the credit card company to get the payment. Other times it was legitimately fraud. And it's like, okay, we end up, eating that chargeback cost because every chargeback has a cost to the company,
Yeah,
right?
it costs money.
And so their team was, again, they felt like they needed more people because they were putting in somewhere between 8 to 12 hours a day and doing all this data entry depending on the day. And in fact, it was so bad with all the, the repetitive typing that they were doing and everything that one of them was actually on, had an appointment to go get their carpal tunnel surgery. Well, we mapped out the process and I said, well, have you started that process today? And I'm like, no. I said, hey, do you mind if I come and just kind of like, follow along with what we just mapped out and see how you do it? And I said, sure, come on. So I sat down at the desk and they're walking through it and they go to the merchant services and they download the CSV form and then they print it out. Well, that wasn't part of what they said they did. And it was like, that's interesting. And then I said, well, what are you going to do with that? Well, we print it out. Why are you printing it out? It's like, oh, we print it out because then we type this back into the, the database for our records. And at that moment, I saw everything I needed to see because they didn't know that you could take a CSV file and you could directly import it into your database. You don't have to retype in this stuff. And I asked the question, I said, so do you ever get fat finger errors where then you have to go back and try to figure, they're like all the time, at the end of the month when we have to, audit the books and make sure sometimes we'll spend 3.5 days just trying to find all of the errors that we made. I'm like, oh, you guys are going to love me. So I go out, I reach out to IT. I didn't know, I was new in the company. I didn't know who to reach out to. So I went through the list of all the managers and I started inviting like all of these people to this meeting. And they're all like, what are we doing here? And I'm like, here's the thing. This is what we need. I explained it in like 2 minutes. Half the people walked out of the room because it wasn't them. The other half said, okay, we can solve that. And so we were able to figure it out. And within, I think about 2 weeks, we had a solution for them and it cut their time in half. And then they were going to get on the docket for about a year later. They were going to do the other piece that would completely automate it. And basically you'd have one person that would spend like, 5 minutes a day, just to run a couple of things, and then they would be done. And we were going to automate everything. But they went from, 8 to 12 hours down to, 4 to 6 hours. Well, that freed up their time to do what they enjoyed doing, which was talking to the customers. They were able to bring in over $1 million in reclaimed chargebacks that they didn't have to pay out. And on top of that, the person that was doing all this data entry that was ready to go in for carpal tunnel syndrome, because they weren't doing the typing, it got better. They didn't actually have to go in for the surgery. So, yeah, it was a huge win. It brought in an additional $1 million to the company. And the people who they had a high turnover in that group for obvious reasons, they enjoyed their work because they got to do what they loved doing, which was talking to the customers.
I think that's a great example that you mentioned a couple of things there. One of them is where to start with lean. It's like start with the things that frustrate you, start with the things that cause you pain, emotional, physical, even physical pain in that example. That's a great example. That's a great story. Okay. Do you have a favorite question? There's a lot of questions that you could ask, but do you have a favorite question you like to use as part of your practice?
Yeah. Once they come up with the time savings, like, great. Now, how can you cut that in half again? And they're like, what? And so, it challenges them. They may not be able to, and that's fine. But, asking that question and asking them as if it's a reality that they can do it, it's like it gets them thinking about, okay, well, how could we do that?
That's a great one. Is there a book or a resource that you want to share or recommend to folks on this journey?
Toyota Engagement Equation. And so both of them worked at Toyota. And so this is from their perspective and being able to, talk about the different tools and the methodology and the thinking that went into making that Toyota successful. Great book. That's probably one of my top ones. There's so many that are out there. You're looking to apply it to, your parenting skills. I wrote one called Parenting the Lean Way, but yeah, I'm constantly thinking about rewriting that because I have kids all the way from 7 to 25. And so, we've got a big range of kids. So, and in fact, first grandkid is going to be born most likely January 1st is the due date. So we'll see if it's this year or next year. But yeah, I'm pretty excited for that new phase in my life. But it doesn't matter that I think that the principles of how do we add value to the people that we care about, whether it's the customer or a family, holds weight. And then when we think about that, we can come up with some amazing things. So when my daughter, who is, I had a little bit later in my life, she's pretty young. In fact, both my daughters are. And I got thinking, of kind of what their life would be like. And then I started thinking, in advance, at some point they're going to get married and, we'll walk them down the aisle, have that daddy-daughter dance. And then I had this terrible thought, which is like, I'm older. What if I don't make it? What if something happens, right? And so then my next thought was, well, how can I make it special for them if I'm not there? And I had this idea that popped into my head. Well, what if we did a daddy-daughter dance every year on their birthday? And I, buy them a white dress. I wear my tux, and we do that dance. And so every year since, both of them have been born, I've been doing that. And so at the dance, hoping I'm there, I'm going to be the best dad ever because I'll have this playing from the time they were, an infant all the way up until, the current time that we're doing the dance. And if I'm not there, I'm still going to be a pretty amazing dad because I've done that with them and we'll still have that dance there. So I would have never come up with that had I not have been thinking about how do I add value to the customer? How do I add value to my daughters? And specifically for a particular process, the daddy-daughter dance. Yeah. So I think when we think beyond ourselves and we think about how to help others, we can do some amazing things. We can come up with some, we can be very creative. And we can help add a lot of value to others, and I think that's what I like about lean is it's not, and I'm not saying it's the ultimate guide for everything, is being a parent and trying to raise kids, but it can help you to get through things. When I look at trying to understand the root cause instead of getting upset, it's almost like I step back and I'm putting on like I'm kind of watching that Hawthorne effect, right? I'm kind of watching. I'm okay. Why are the kids fighting? Let me, sit back. And so now I've removed myself from being in the situation. I'm an external observer of what's happening. I don't get as upset. At one point, we created a yelling KPI.
Yeah.
I think the funniest thing with that was it took them a couple of weeks to realize that there was a baseline that was set. And then they kept on seeing my baseline, get better and better. And there was 1 week where on the last day, and my boys come in and they are bugging me and they are just pushing every button and they know all my buttons and they're pushing them. And finally I just lose it. I'm like, you need to stop doing this. And they start laughing and high-fiving each other. I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, we couldn't let you, get the entire week without yelling at least once. It's like, you little rascals. But I think there is opportunity when you're measuring performance and something like that, even, you can get better. We just have to hold ourselves accountable. That's part of respect for people. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of books out there. I'm not saying go out and buy mine, but, you know, there's, there's a lot of opportunities, coming to events and being able to meet with people and talk to people and network and learn what they're doing, listening to podcasts like yours. All of that is just amazing opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's a great answer. And I love your examples. And again, that's one thing that I think is just an important part of whether you call it lean or just continuous improvement, just learning is hearing examples and getting ideas from others, because, you hear an example, you're like, oh, I can apply that in this way. And so I like your daddy-daughter dance example. That's a fun lesson there.
Is if I talk about that, let me give one other, especially for continuous cost improvement that we're talking about. How do we go ahead and save money when we understand what the need of the customer is? We can do some amazing things. So when I was at Alaska Airlines, the operations folks, I was doing a different project. I was interviewing them, voice of the customer, and they said, "Hey, I know this is out of scope, but we've been asking IT for a decade to give us up-to-date information about who's on the plane." I'm like, wait, you guys are responsible for day of flying. What do you mean you don't know who's on the plane? "Oh, well, we know basically. The data we have is about 3 to 5 days old, depending on the day of the week." And I'm like, that I don't understand that. And like, neither do we. We've been asking IT for a decade. I'm like, so can you help us, get IT to do it? And I'm like, well, you're right. That is out of scope, but I'll think about it. Uh, And so the next day, I'm in a meeting. The meeting gets canceled. There's a finance guy there. I pull him aside and say, "Hey, before you head out, you have a couple minutes." And so I spent about 3 to 5 minutes explaining to him the situation. And I said, "You guys love numbers." And they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Do you happen to have up-to-date information, real-time information about how many seats are sold, how many people are on the plane, things like that?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, not only do that, I have that. I can tell you what membership class they are. I can tell you, how many miles they've flown. I can tell you where they're flying from or to. Yeah, whatever you want. I've got it all." I'm like, "Can you share that with operations?" And they're like, "Sure. Who needs it?" Gave them the names. Within 45 minutes of having that conversation, less than 24 hours from hearing about it, they had what they've been asking IT for a decade to deliver. So I guess my biggest number one tip for continuous cost improvement, being able to help people to save money within an organization, you have to get out of your silo. You have to understand what the other silos do, what their job is. You have to understand what their needs are. You have to understand what their challenges are. And then you have that opportunity to be able to share that with others, to be able to help them, kind of make those connections. If you can break down silos within an organization, you're going to be unstoppable. Unfortunately, most people, they like living in their silos. It's easy to blame the upstream folks and the downstream folks for why you can't do what you're doing. And instead of taking that responsibility and saying, I got to figure it out. So in this case, yes, should have IT have done something earlier? Absolutely. Why didn't they? I don't know. That's another discussion. But if you understand that other groups also need that same information, reach out to them. Hey, do you happen to have this? About a month later, TJ, the head of operations, came to me and he's like, "Hey, just want to let you know, this is going to save the airline close to $1 million a month, because now we have better information. And where we used to cancel a flight that had a fewer number of people, now we're looking at that and we might cancel the full flight, because all of them, this is their first leg of their journey. They can all go home. We're not going to have to put them up overnight, or very few of them. Whereas the other flight that we would have normally canceled, they're all pass through. They're all going to a different, thing. So by, canceling that flight, which we would have done in the past, now we're not having to put every single one of them up. That's going to save us money. Do that, a couple times a week, and that adds up. We're going to save $1 million a month easy, just because we have up-to-date information. So nothing I did other than just saying, "Hey, finance, you have this, right?" They're like, "Yeah, give it to them." And that 3-minute conversation generated over, I like to say, just to be on the safe side, save $10 million for a 3-minute conversation, just by reaching out to a different silo and putting them in place. So if you really want to be successful, back to your other question about, what advice would I give? understand each business unit, understand what they do, understand what their challenges are, and then you can help align and make sure you're bringing in the right people to the improvements that you're trying to make so that you can actually get the movement that needs to happen.
The idea of breaking down silos, I mean, it seems like such a simple idea, but I know how many people are, you kind of get into your ruts where you feel like you know what you know, and you're like, oh, it's just not possible, or whatever. Yeah, so it's so interesting. I wish there was a simple way to wave a wand and just make people understand that in their organization, because I see that so often. Like, I mean, and breaking down silos is a problem almost in everybody's business. Yeah. So I don't know if there's a magic wand for how to fix that. Could you share that with us?
I mean, it's talking to people. It's getting out of your comfort zone. I mean, one of the things that I did when I was at Daimler, I tried to always eat with somebody different. And so one of the things that I found is the admins, they're probably the most powerful people, and everybody ignores them. And yet, space, a meeting space was at a premium, and there were times where you couldn't, hey, everybody's available at this time, but there's no place to meet. So you'd be frustrated, and you have to go to something. Now, I always could find a meeting place because the admins, or the executives, they had their own meeting room, so they could always get that person, room. And so I'm constantly in the boardroom. I'm constantly in these other, because they're not using it. And so I would go to them like, hey, I can't find anything for this time. Do you have anything? Like, yeah, you can use the boardroom. Of course, if the execs need it, you get kicked out. I'm like, cool. But, and nobody could figure out, why are you always in the boardroom? Why are you always in this room or that room? And it was like, because I know who to talk to. And I only knew who to talk to because I went and sat down and I had lunch with them and, asked them what they did. You have to be interested in people and, find out what they do. And it's amazing. People want to help people. And if you ask them, they're willing to help. And so I think that's another huge thing to know.
Yeah, that's so good. And I guess that's just another good reason to get outside of your lane occasionally, go to a conference, whether it's a virtual one or a physical one. Those are great opportunities to look at things through a new lens. So that's wonderful. Well, do you want to share a website or a LinkedIn information, how somebody might connect with you or follow stuff for you or your conference?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, you can reach me at Jared Thatcher, all one word. So I think it's LinkedIn, .com -in Jared Thatcher. But yeah, just, feel free to reach out. I accept any connection, unless they're trying to sell me, some crypto or something like that. Apart from that, yeah, I'm definitely love to connect, and I answer questions if people have them. In terms of finding out about the Global Lean Summit, that's it. Just globalleansummit.com. And so, yeah, so we're there. We're constantly trying to do things to help people, and it's I don't know. It's what I love.
That's terrific. That's super terrific. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing your passion about lean, and just super happy to hear how that was able to turn into this conference. And it sounds like it's been able to benefit a lot of people and a lot of sharing of best practices. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast here today. We really appreciate your time and your experience, and we look forward to following you on LinkedIn or at the conference. If anybody out there would like to suggest a guest or ask a question to Jared or myself, you can check in with us on LinkedIn, of course, me, Keith Norris, Jared Thatcher. And this will conclude this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow us on the socials and share the podcast. Maybe add a little comment there in the comments area. Share it with your colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change.